People tend to lie more than we would like to admit. And it's not just the strangers we encounter, it can be your closest friends, your partner, or even a family member. We all want to believe that we are good at detecting lies. But the harsh reality is that we often miss the red flags. It's not because the signs aren't there, it's because we choose to overlook them. Sometimes subconsciously. I've been through this experience myself. I used to think I had an excellent sense of judgment when it came to reading people, only to later discover that someone I trusted had been lying to me for months. The truth is, I wasn't oblivious to the signs. They were right in front of me the whole time. It was the small shifts in their behavior, the exaggerated justifications, and their sudden defensiveness. But I chose to ignore these cues because I wanted to trust that person. This is a common trap we fall into. We need to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. People lie all the time. And accepting this reality can help us see through the facades that others put up. Once you embrace this, you'll be able to discern the signs of deception much more easily. But be warned, it might hit closer to home than you think. One sign that someone is lying is how quickly they change the subject. Have you ever been in a conversation where, the moment you bring up something meaningful, the other person swiftly shifts the topic, almost like you're playing a game of verbal dodgeball? It's as if they have an escape route planned, ready to use whenever things get too real. 1 minute, you're talking about an important issue, and the next, they've deflected the conversation to something trivial, like dinner plans or a random Instagram post. This happened to me in a past relationship. Every time I tried to bring up serious topics, whether it was about our future or how we would tackle challenges together, the conversation would suddenly veer off into unrelated territories. I convinced myself that they simply weren't ready to talk about such things or that I was coming on too strong. But the truth was, they were never ready, and their constant deflection was about more than just avoiding an uncomfortable topic. It was about avoiding responsibility. People don't change the subject just because they're forgetful or distracted. No, they do it because confronting the truth is hard. It's far easier to sidestep the truth than to deal with it. And we often let them get away with it because we don't want to push too hard. We prioritize maintaining peace over confronting the possibility of dishonesty. But this is where we make a critical mistake. When someone dodges a tough conversation, they aren't just avoiding conflict, they're inviting dishonesty into the relationship. When a person consistently avoids important discussions by changing the subject, it's not just about evading a particular topic, it's about refusing to engage with the truth. It sends a clear message. They value their comfort more than your clarity. And what does that say about the relationship? Whether it's with a friend, a partner, or even a colleague, the lie doesn't always come in the form of a direct falsehood. Sometimes, it's as subtle as a change in conversation. We often think that the only lies worth calling out are the ones spoken aloud. But it's the lies left unsaid, the ones hidden in the deflection and avoidance, that slowly erode trust. I learned this the hard way. Every time I let the conversation shift, I was silently giving them permission to keep avoiding the truth, allowing them to steer me further away from clarity. I wanted so badly to believe that everything was fine, that I ignored the fact that they were dodging the tough conversations. But here's the danger in that. When you let someone change the subject to avoid the truth, it's not just the topic that's being avoided, it's the integrity of the relationship itself that's being compromised. What I've learned from all of this is that you should never let someone off the hook when they try to change the subject. It's not about being confrontational, it's about setting a standard for honesty. If someone truly values you and the relationship you share, they'll face the hard conversations head on, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. And if they don't, maybe it's time to ask yourself what kind of relationship you're really building. Because the truth, no matter how hard it is, builds stronger foundations than any carefully constructed lie. Another undeniable sign of deception is when someone listens just to respond rather than to understand. Listening is an underrated skill, one that is fundamental to making others feel valued. Yet, most of us are terrible at it. Instead of truly listening to what the other person is saying, we're often just waiting for our turn to speak. We're so preoccupied with crafting our next brilliant point that we miss the chance to actually understand the person in front of us. And that's one of the fastest ways to make someone feel invisible. Here's a hard truth. If you're not listening to understand, you're wasting your time. I've been guilty of this myself. There have been countless times where I've sat in a conversation, nodding along, pretending to be engaged, while in reality, I was preparing my response. And guess what? People notice that. They can tell when you're not genuinely listening. It doesn't make them feel heard, it makes them feel used. That's not being charming, it's being selfish. But when you listen to truly understand someone, you're giving them a rare and valuable gift. You're showing them respect, creating a space where they feel safe to open up. I remember a particular conversation with a colleague who was clearly going through a tough time. My instinct was to jump in and offer advice, to fix their problem, but instead, I stopped myself and simply listened. No interjections, no unsolicited advice, just pure, undivided attention. By the end of that conversation, they told me, "I've never felt so heard." That moment was a revelation. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is simply listen. In a world filled with constant noise, genuine listening is a rare gift. People don't always want advice or opinions. More often, they just want to feel understood. They want to know that someone truly gets them. And when you can provide that, you stand out as someone who cares, someone who values connection over conversation. That's the real magic of human interaction. So, stop listening just to respond. Listen to understand. That's how you make people feel truly seen, valued, and heard. There's another telltale sign that someone is lying: defensiveness without cause. Have you ever asked someone a simple, harmless question, and they respond as if you've accused them of a crime? When someone becomes defensive over a seemingly innocent inquiry, it's often a red flag that there's more going on beneath the surface than they're letting on. People who are telling the truth don't usually feel the need to defend themselves so aggressively. But when someone is hiding something, even the smallest question can make them feel threatened, prompting them to lash out in defense. In all of these signs, changing the subject, not listening, and defensiveness, what's really at stake is the integrity of the relationship. Lies, whether spoken aloud or left unsaid, slowly chip away at the trust that holds relationships together. The sooner we learn to recognize these signs, the sooner we can start to build connections based on honesty, clarity, and mutual respect. Because in the end, a relationship built on truth is always stronger than one constructed on lies. Another unmistakable red flag that you're being lied to is when someone becomes defensive without any real reason to be. It's the kind of reaction that's so over the top, so unnecessarily dramatic, that it makes you stop and think, why are they getting so worked up over something so small? Imagine asking a simple question like, "Did you take the last slice of pizza?" And suddenly, they're launching into a full-blown monologue about how they would never do something like that, followed by indignation that you would even dare to question their integrity. It's not just an answer, it's a full-on, wild overreaction, like they've been caught doing something much worse than eating the last slice. That's what we call getting defensive without cause. And it's a massive red flag that screams, "I'm hiding something." Let me share a story with you. I was once involved in a group project, and one of my teammates started acting oddly every time I asked for an update on his part of the work. You know, basic project management stuff, just a simple, "Hey, how's it going with the report?" But instead of a straightforward response, he would get defensive and say things like, "Why do you always assume I'm not pulling my weight? I've been working really hard. And I don't need to be micromanaged." This was the same guy who spent most of our meetings scrolling through his phone. Mind you, as it turned out, he had barely done any of his assigned work and was trying to cover it up the entire time. His defensiveness wasn't just an isolated quirk, it was a cover for his guilt. Here's where things get controversial. People who get overly defensive when they have no real reason to be are usually the ones with something to hide. It's the classic "hit dog will holler" situation. I've learned from experience that when someone reacts like this, it's a good time to step back and look at the bigger picture. What are they so desperately trying to protect? Because if someone has nothing to hide, they won't feel the need to turn a casual question into an attack on their character. Honest people respond calmly, clearly, and without drama. Guilty people, on the other hand, are on high alert, as if they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. The deeper lesson here is about human nature. When people act defensively without any real provocation, it's often their guilt talking, not their integrity. And you need to be bold enough to recognize that their overreaction isn't about you being out of line. It's about them trying to keep you from uncovering the truth. It's like they're a house with all the doors locked, pretending everything is fine while hoping you never try to open one of the doors. And here's the kicker. When we ignore these defensive reactions, we allow the lies to thrive. We teach people that they can get away with deception by making us feel bad for even asking a simple question. But it's not about being rude or overly intrusive. It's about valuing honesty and transparency over false comfort. People will go to great lengths to avoid being caught in a lie. And defensiveness is one of their go-to tactics. The next time someone gets ridiculously defensive over an innocent question, don't back down. Stay curious. Ask the follow-up questions. And push a little harder. 9 times out of 10, their overreaction is a smokescreen to cover up the truth. And you deserve better than to live behind that fog of deception. Another classic sign that someone is being less than honest is when their story is just too polished, too rehearsed, almost like they're auditioning for an Oscar. You know the type of person. Every detail of their story is perfectly placed. The timing is immaculate, and the narrative flows so seamlessly that it feels like you're watching a Hollywood production. But guess what? It probably is too good to be true. I've encountered this more times than I'd like to admit. There was one guy the first knew, we'll call him Jake, who could spin stories like no one else. His tales had a cinematic flair, like something straight out of a blockbuster. He once told us about a big business deal he supposedly closed, describing every moment with such precision that it felt like we were getting a live play-by-play. He painted a picture down to the very second he signed the contract, ending with a firm handshake while gazing out over the city skyline as if he was the star of his own personal action film. You could almost hear the swelling movie soundtrack in the background. But here's the problem. Life isn't that tidy. Reality is messy, complicated, and full of imperfections. When someone's story is that smooth, it's a sign that your lie detector should be going off. It turned out that Jake had exaggerated half of his story and fabricated the rest. The sad truth is that most people don't want to call out these overly polished stories because, let's be honest, we love a good story. We're wired to enjoy tales that are neat, engaging, and well-crafted, so we let it slide, even when our gut tells us something is off. And that's exactly how liars get away with it. They rely on our need for a neat, easy-to-digest narrative. But here's the deeper message. When someone polishes the details of their story too much, they're not just trying to impress you, they're trying to control the narrative. They want you to believe a version of events that benefits them. It's like they're the director, writer, and star of their own movie. And you're just the audience, expected to sit back and clap without question. But perfect doesn't exist in real life. And when a story sounds too rehearsed, it's likely fiction rather than fact. I learned this the hard way with Jake. When I started digging deeper into his stories, asking for more details, the crisp edges of his narrative began to blur. What had once seemed like a flawless tale of success quickly unraveled into an awkward mess. That's the thing about liars. They can rehearse their stories, but they can't handle the follow-up questions. Real life is chaotic, unpredictable, and imperfect. When someone's story is too smooth, it's a sign that they're crafting a fantasy rather than recounting the truth. Ultimately, these polished stories, much like defensiveness or changing the subject, are all signs that someone is hiding something. And the sooner we learn to recognize these signs, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the relationships in our lives with honesty and integrity. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve the truth, even if it's messy. The deeper message here is this: life is inherently complex, messy, and full of imperfections, and that's not only normal, but it's a good thing. When someone presents you with a story where every single detail is perfectly aligned, where nothing goes wrong, where everything magically falls into place, they are not just telling you a story, they are selling you an illusion. And if you buy into that illusion, you are doing yourself a disservice. True connection, real trust, and authentic relationships are not built on fairy tales. They are built on raw, sometimes uncomfortable, honesty. So, the next time someone gives you a story that feels a little too polished, don't just sit back and enjoy the show. Ask questions, dig deeper. Real truth is messy, and if someone isn't willing to show you those imperfections, then they aren't showing you the truth at all. Remember, life doesn't have to be perfect to be honest. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is probably hiding something they don't want you to see. Another important signal you should never overlook is body language. Specifically when someone's body turns away from you, even if they're still talking to you. You may have noticed this before. Someone is speaking to you, but their body is angled away, as if their words are saying, "I'm engaged," while their posture is screaming, "I'd rather be anywhere but here." It's subtle, almost sneaky, and many people don't realize it. But trust me, it speaks volumes. Let me share a personal story to illustrate this. I once had a friend who, during deeper, more personal conversations, would always subtly shift his body away from me. At first, I thought maybe it was just how he sat or that he wasn't comfortable. But after a while, it became obvious. Every time we touched on something serious or uncomfortable, his body would start turning away from me, as if he was physically trying to escape the conversation. It didn't take long for me to figure out that something was off. Later, I discovered that he had been hiding some truths, not major, life-altering lies, but enough to break the trust we had built. His body language had betrayed him long before his words ever did. Now, here's the controversial part. A lot of people dismiss body language as unimportant or think that reading into it is overanalyzing. But that's where they're wrong. Your body doesn't lie the way your words can. When someone turns their body away from you, even slightly, it's like their subconscious is trying to create distance, not just physical distance, but emotional and mental distance from the truth. Most of us, however, choose to ignore these signs because we don't want to deal with the implications. We convince ourselves it's just a habit or that it doesn't mean anything. But let's be real. If someone is physically distancing themselves from you during a conversation, it's a red flag. It may not always indicate a major lie, but it's definitely a sign that something is off. The deeper point here is that when people can't face you directly, it's not just about comfort, it's about avoidance. They don't want to confront the reality of the situation, and their body language is revealing their discomfort before they even realize it. I used to ignore these signs, thinking that maybe I was reading too much into things. But after seeing it play out time and time again, I've learned to trust my instincts. When someone turns away from you mid-conversation, they're not just doing it because they're restless or uncomfortable. They're subconsciously trying to avoid being fully seen. Because deep down, they're hiding something. The real message here is that body language doesn't happen in a vacuum. If someone's body is turning away from you while they're speaking, it's a signal that they're uncomfortable with what's being discussed. They may be trying to shield themselves, not from you, but from the truth they're unwilling to reveal. It's almost like they believe that if they physically turn away, they can somehow escape your ability to see through them. What I've learned from all of this is simple. Don't ignore these signs. Sure, it might feel awkward to notice, and it can be even more awkward to bring it up, but body language is one of the most honest forms of communication we have. When someone turns away from you, they're creating distance emotionally, mentally, and physically, and if you don't address it, that distance will only continue to grow. So, the next time you're in a conversation and notice someone subtly angling away from you, take it as a cue. Maybe it's time to ask the tough question they don't want to answer. Maybe it's time to dig deeper and figure out what they're hiding. Because honesty doesn't turn its back on you, and neither should the people you trust. One more red flag that often goes unnoticed is when someone laughs off serious topics. Have you ever tried to have a meaningful conversation with someone, only for them to laugh it off as if it's nothing? You're there, trying to talk about something important, maybe a personal issue, maybe something that's been weighing on you, and instead of engaging, they hit you with an awkward chuckle and brush it off. It's almost as if they're using humor as a shield to dodge the gravity of the situation. At first, it might seem innocent, maybe even a little charming. But trust me, when someone consistently laughs off serious topics, it's often a sign they're hiding something. Here's a personal example. I was once in a relationship where, whenever I tried to bring up important issues, real talk, the things that matter, I'd say something like, "Hey, I've been feeling disconnected lately," and the response? A laugh, followed by, "Oh, you're just overthinking it. Relax." That laugh wasn't just a casual response. It was a way to dismiss the conversation, to avoid dealing with the issue at hand. And guess what? Over time, I realized that every time I tried to address something serious, it was met with humor, sarcasm, or a quick joke. What I eventually learned was that the laughter was a tactic, a way to dodge accountability and avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Here's where it gets controversial. We've all been conditioned to think humor is a good thing, right? It lightens the mood, diffuses tension, and makes everyone feel more at ease. But when someone constantly uses laughter to sidestep serious topics, it's a red flag. It's like they're trying to sneak lies past you, disguised as jokes. They know that laughter is disarming, that it makes you less likely to push back or probe deeper. But here's the truth. Real issues don't just disappear with a joke. And when someone laughs off serious conversations, they're not just deflecting, they're hiding. They're trying to avoid accountability and keep you from digging too deep. The real lesson here is that not all laughter is innocent. Sometimes, it's a tool for avoidance. So, the next time someone laughs off a serious topic, don't let it slide. Pay attention. Ask the questions they're trying to avoid. Because humor can be used to mask discomfort. And if you're not careful, it can be used to hide the truth. Most people will let someone get away with laughing off serious topics because no one wants to be the buzzkill who presses too hard after the conversation has taken a lighter turn. It's uncomfortable to push back, especially when humor has been introduced. It feels like you're going against the flow. But people often laugh off serious matters because they don't want to face the weight of the conversation. It's their escape route, plain and simple. They want to keep things light and breezy so you don't dig deeper, hoping the topic will just blow over without further scrutiny. But here's the truth. Real conversations, the ones that truly matter, aren't meant to be easy or light all the time. They're supposed to challenge you, make you think, and push both parties toward honesty. If someone can't handle that, you have to ask yourself, what are they really hiding behind those laughs? There's a deeper message here about emotional maturity. When people laugh off serious topics, they're signaling that they're either not ready or, worse, not willing to have an honest conversation. It's like they're putting a shiny, joking facade over something they know they can't explain or don't want to confront. Maybe it's fear of being vulnerable. Or maybe it's because they know that if they actually talk about it, they'll expose the truth they've been trying to bury. I've seen this pattern countless times. People use humor to deflect, to make you feel like you're the one who's taking things too seriously. But here's the thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking serious matters seriously. If someone laughs it off, don't be afraid to call them out. A simple, direct question like, "Why is this funny to you?" can open the door to the real issue they're trying to avoid. This question can shift the dynamic, exposing the discomfort they've been hiding behind their humor. The real problem with laughing off serious topics is that it shuts down the conversation before it even starts. It's like putting up a giant, "No entry" sign on the road to real communication. And if you don't address it, those critical conversations about relationships, trust, accountability never happen. Everything stays on the surface, and nothing ever gets resolved. The deeper message here is this: honesty isn't always fun. It's not always lighthearted, and it's not something that should be brushed away with a laugh. If someone can't take serious things seriously, it's not just about them dodging one conversation. It's about them avoiding real connection and avoiding the truth. And if they can't face those tough topics with you, how much trust can you really put in them? So, the next time someone laughs off a serious conversation, don't let it slide. Ask the hard questions. Press on the uncomfortable truth. Laughter may lighten the moment, but it doesn't erase the weight of what's really going on underneath. And if they're not willing to drop the act, then you've got your answer. They're not being honest with you. Another red flag that often goes unnoticed is vagueness when pressed for specifics. Have you ever asked someone for details, and suddenly, instead of a clear answer, they turn into a poet, full of ambiguity and grand gestures, but with no actual information? You ask for names, dates, facts, anything concrete, and all you get is fluff. It's like they're circling around the point, dancing in a fog, hoping you won't notice that they've said a lot without saying anything at all. It's one of the most frustrating experiences, but it's also one of the most telling signs that someone might be hiding something. Let me give you an example from my own life. I once had a coworker who would always talk about these big deals he was supposedly closing. It sounded impressive until you asked for specifics. Every time we pressed him for more details, like which companies he was working with or how far along the negotiations were, he would respond with the same vague answers. "Oh, we're just in the early stages. Some really exciting conversations are happening. I can't say too much right now. But trust me, it's huge." Weeks would go by, and we'd ask again, only to hear the same song and dance. Eventually, we found out there was no deal. In fact, half of the conversations he had talked about were entirely made up. He had been bluffing the whole time, hoping no one would dig too deep. Here's where it gets controversial. When someone gets vague when you ask for specifics, it's not just that they're being secretive, they're lying. Let's call it what it is. Vagueness is a liar's best friend because it allows them to escape accountability. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. You think you're getting somewhere, but they keep slipping away with half answers and, it's complicated, responses. They're betting on you being too polite or too distracted to push harder. Here's the thing. People who are being honest don't need to hide behind vagueness. They can give you clear, direct answers because they have nothing to protect. If you ask them for specifics, they'll give you the information straight up, no dance, no smoke, no mirrors. But a liar? They thrive in the gray areas. They know that the more vague they can be, the harder it is for you to pin them down. It's classic avoidance behavior. And most people fall for it because we've been trained to not push too hard. We don't want to come off as rude or too demanding for answers. But let's be real for a second. We've all been in situations where we've been vague ourselves. Right? Maybe we weren't prepared. Maybe we felt cornered. Or maybe we just didn't want to admit that we didn't know something. But here's the difference. Someone who is honest will own up to it. "I'm not sure right now," or "I need to check on that," is a whole lot different than giving you a bunch of fluff just to sound like they're in control. The problem arises when people deliberately use vagueness to avoid being caught. There's a deep message here about integrity and trust. When someone won't give you straight answers, they're undermining the foundation of trust in your relationship, whether that's personal or professional. And the worst part? They're relying on your good nature to not push them too hard. They're banking on the idea that you'll let it slide because pressing for specifics feels awkward or uncomfortable. But here's the thing. When you feel that awkwardness creeping in, that's exactly the moment you need to push further. Because vague answers aren't just a lack of clarity, they're often a lack of honesty. So, don't be afraid to press for the truth. If someone can't give you a straight answer, it's a clear sign that something's off, and you deserve better than to be left in the fog of their half-truths. Real trust is built on clarity, not ambiguity, and anyone who relies on vagueness to get by is probably hiding more than they're willing to admit. You need to double down and ask for clarity. Especially when it comes to people who can't seem to provide straightforward answers when you ask for specifics. People who struggle with giving clear, direct responses are often uncomfortable with the truth. And that's the controversial truth that many won't tell you. Some will make excuses for them, saying, "Oh, maybe they're just bad with details." Or, "Maybe they're too busy to answer properly." But from my experience, I've learned that true honesty doesn't shy away from specifics. If someone truly values being honest with you, they'll be clear. If they're dancing around your question, avoiding the nitty-gritty details, that's their way of signaling that there's something they don't want you to know. I've stopped letting people get away with vague answers, because I've realized that vague responses are often just smoke and mirrors to cover up something deeper. If you want to know if someone is being straight with you, observe how they react when you ask for specifics. Do they get visibly uncomfortable? Do they give you broad, sweeping statements filled with fluff but no substance? That's your cue to dig deeper. And if, after all that, they still can't give you a clear answer, take it as a sign that they're hiding something. And that's where the real problem lies. The deeper takeaway here is this: honesty isn't always convenient, but it's always clear. Real honesty is straightforward. It doesn't hide behind ambiguity or deflect with vague statements. When people refuse to give you specific details, it's often because they're afraid of what those details will reveal. It's like they're building a wall of vagueness to protect themselves from exposing the truth. And if someone isn't willing to tear down that wall and give you the clarity you deserve, you have to ask yourself why they're putting up that wall in the first place. This is where it becomes critical not to let things slide. The next time someone gives you a vague answer when you're pressing for specifics, don't back down. You deserve clarity, and anyone who respects you enough will be more than willing to provide it. Vagueness might seem like a small, insignificant thing in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a big red flag. It's a sign of deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. Issues that can erode trust far quicker than any outright lie ever could. Here's the bottom line: lies don't always come wrapped in obvious deceit. Sometimes it's not the grand acts of dishonesty that reveal the truth, but rather the small things, the vague answers, the over-polished stories, the awkward laughs, the uncomfortable body language. These are the subtle signs that give everything away if you're paying close enough attention. People may try to hide the truth in plain sight, using these small tricks to distract you. But you have to stay sharp. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. And don't ever settle for half-truths. You deserve honesty, real, raw, unfiltered honesty. And if someone can't give you that, then they're not deserving of your trust. They're the ones you need to distance yourself from, because a relationship, whether personal or professional, cannot survive on vagueness and ambiguity. It thrives on transparency and mutual respect. If someone isn't willing to be open and straightforward with you, then they're showing you exactly who they are. They're showing you that they're not ready or willing to build a foundation of trust. And that's your cue to walk away. Stay sharp, stay true to yourself, and don't let anyone undermine your right to clarity. When people choose to be vague, they're not protecting you, they're protecting themselves, often at the expense of your trust and your peace of mind. Remember, the people who genuinely care about you will never hesitate to be clear with you. They will understand the value of transparency, and they won't be afraid to give you the specifics, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. So, take this as a reminder. When people evade your questions or dance around the details, don't just let it slide. Press forward, dig deeper, seek clarity, because you deserve it. Anyone who can't handle that level of honesty isn't someone you need in your life. Let them go, and always demand the truth, even if it's hard to hear, because that's where real relationships, real trust, and real growth happen. In those moments when people skirt around the truth, offering only pieces of it instead of the whole, remember that the truth is not always easy, but it is always necessary. The people who really value you will never find a need to hide behind vagueness or ambiguity. They will know that being honest might be uncomfortable in the moment. But it's the key to building something that lasts. It's the foundation upon which trust is built. And trust is what holds everything else together. Without it, no relationship, no partnership, and no connection can thrive. When someone starts to feel uncomfortable giving you straight answers, it's often because the truth is something they don't want to face themselves. It's not just about protecting you from the truth, it's about protecting themselves from the vulnerability that comes with honesty. But here's the thing. True strength doesn't come from avoiding the hard conversations. It comes from embracing them, knowing that the discomfort is temporary, but the clarity and peace that follow are worth it. The people who matter in your life, the ones who respect you and value your relationship, will never hesitate to give you clarity. They will understand that even the toughest truths are better than the comfort of half-truths or lies. They know that real relationships aren't built on avoidance. They are built on mutual understanding, on facing difficult conversations head-on, and on never shying away from what's real. This is where you need to stand firm. Don't let anyone convince you that being vague or deflecting is a normal way of communicating. Don't let them make you feel like you're the one asking too much by seeking clarity. Because you're not. Clarity isn't a luxury in relationships, it's a necessity. And anyone who truly values your relationship will understand that. They won't make you dig for answers. They will offer them freely because they know that withholding the truth, in any form, is a betrayal of trust. Think of it this way. Every time someone dodges a question or provides a vague response, it's like they're building a wall between you and the truth. And over time, that wall becomes harder and harder to break down. It starts small, just a missed detail here, an unclear answer there, but eventually, those small omissions grow into larger barriers. And before you know it, the relationship is no longer built on mutual trust and understanding, but on layers of unspoken truths and unaddressed issues. But here's the good news. You have the power to break down that wall. By asking the right questions, by not accepting vagueness as an answer, by holding people accountable for the clarity you deserve, you can prevent those barriers from forming in the first place. You can create an environment where honesty is valued, where people feel safe to be vulnerable, and where trust can flourish. It's not always easy. In fact, it can be incredibly uncomfortable to ask the tough questions and to press for specifics when someone is clearly trying to avoid them. But remember this. The discomfort you feel in those moments is far less than the discomfort that comes from living in the dark, not knowing the full truth. It's far less than the erosion of trust that happens when you allow vagueness and ambiguity to take the place of clarity and honesty. And here's the thing about honesty, it's not just about avoiding lies. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to tell the truth. Even when it's difficult, it's about fostering relationships where you don't have to worry about hidden agendas, where you can trust that what someone says is exactly what they mean. That kind of honesty is rare, but it's worth striving for. So, as you move forward, carry this truth with you. You deserve clarity. You deserve relationships where you never have to question whether someone is being straightforward with you. And if someone can't provide that, if they can't meet you at that level of honesty, then they're not someone you need in your life. Let them go. Surround yourself with people who value transparency, who are willing to face the uncomfortable truths, and who know that real connection is built on honesty, not on vague words or half answers. Asking for clarity is not about being difficult or demanding. It's about setting a standard for the kind of relationships you want to have in your life. It's about recognizing that real trust can only be built when both people are willing to be fully honest with each other. And that kind of trust, once it's established, is unbreakable. At the end of the day, the people who are meant to stay in your life will be the ones who are willing to be real with you. They won't hide behind vagueness or deflect tough questions. They will respect you enough to give you the clarity you deserve. And that's the foundation upon which you can build something meaningful, something that lasts. So, don't shy away from the hard questions. Don't settle for half-truths. Because you deserve the whole story. You deserve honesty. And the people who can't give that to you, they're not worth your time. Stay true to yourself. Stay sharp. And remember, the truth may not always be easy, but it's always worth it. In the end, it's the only thing that can truly set you free.